Torrential rain beat against the windows of the family's old country house. It was a dark night, worthy of a horror story, which Sarah, a 17-year-old girl, was determined to make exciting. She was spending the weekend at her grandmother's house, an imposing and gloomy-looking property that had been built many decades ago. Ever since Sarah was a child, she had always heard sinister stories about the house. Whispers of specters, nighttime footsteps, and unsettling shadows were just some of the legends that surrounded the place. Apparently, the family had a basement that was famous for being a place where secrets were kept locked away. His grandmother, an enigmatic woman of few words, had always kept the basement locked and forbade anyone from entering it. Sarah grew up curious about what might be hidden down there, but her grandmother had always warned her never to try to solve the mystery of the basement. As the rain fell and the wind howled outside, Sarah found herself in the house's living room, examining old family photographs and dusty heirlooms that decorated the place. She felt an unsettling feeling that the house held deep secrets, and her gaze constantly turned to the door leading to the basement. With a mixture of courage and curiosity, Sarah finally stood up and crossed the room toward the basement door. The handle was cold to the touch, and she hesitated for a moment, but his eagerness to unravel the mystery was greater. She opened the door and walked down the creaky wooden stairs to the basement. The darkness was suffocating, and she turned on her cell phone's flashlight to light the way. Sarah searched the dusty shelves and forgotten objects that were scattered around. Old furniture, stacked boxes, and even old childhood toys. The feeling that she was invading a forbidden place tormented her, but her determination was stronger. As he scanned the shelves, his flashlight illuminated a forgotten wooden chest in the darkest corner of the basement. Intrigued, Sarah approached and began opening the trunk. The creak of the lid echoed in the dark cellar. The trunk contained an assortment of mysterious objects, old letters, faded clothes, and even a porcelain doll with glass eyes that seemed to follow Sarah with an icy gaze. She picked up one of the letters and began to read it. The handwritten words told stories of a past she barely knew, of events that had occurred in that house. As Sarah leafed through the letters and looked at the objects in the trunk, she felt something wasn't right. The air was thick, and a feeling of being watched enveloped her. She heard a faint, barely audible sound echoing through the basement, as if someone or something was moving in the shadows. Sarah turned quickly, her flashlight illuminating the darkness. There was nothing visible, but the feeling that I was not alone was overwhelming. His heart began to beat faster as a whispering voice seemed to echo in the basement. "Who's there?" she whispered with a lump in her throat. A shiver ran down his spine as the whispering voice responded with an indistinct murmur. She couldn't understand the words, but she knew she wasn't alone in that basement. Something or someone was down there with her. Fear gripped Sarah, and she ran upstairs, leaving the basement behind. She locked the door and ran to her room, where she curled up on the bed, trying to understand what she had experienced in the scary basement. Were the legends about the house real? And who or what was in the basement with her? That dark night had triggered a series of events that would forever change Sarah's life and send her on a search for terrifying answers. After the terrifying experience in the basement, Sarah spent the night awake, trying to understand what had happened. She couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking in the darkness of her grandmother's basement. However, her curiosity continued to torment her, and the need to unravel the mystery became irresistible. The next morning, with daylight banishing the shadows of the night before, Sarah gathered her courage and decided to return to the basement. She was determined to find out what had caused the whispers and the feeling of a supernatural presence in that dark room. Going down the wooden stairs, she came across the chest she'd explored earlier. This time, his attention was drawn to a yellowed paper envelope that was hidden under some old letters. She opened the envelope and found an old photograph. In the photo, his grandmother, still young, was surrounded by a group of people with somber expressions. Everyone was dressed strangely, in clothes that seemed to belong to another era. Sarah examined the image more closely and noticed that there were mysterious symbols drawn on the walls in the background. The faces of the people in the photograph looked tense and scared. She was about to put the photo back in the envelope when something caught her eye. On the back of the photograph was an inscription in ancient calligraphy: "Those who seek power, beware the price." The inscription sent shivers down Sarah's spine, as it seemed to indicate that the quest for power was linked to something dark and dangerous. She continued to search the trunk and found an old diary. This diary undoubtedly belonged to his grandmother. Sarah began reading the yellowed pages, where her grandmother had recorded strange events and encounters that occurred in the house and, more specifically, in the basement. As she delved into the recorded stories, she realized that the stories went far beyond mere urban legends. His grandmother described encounters with supernatural beings and inexplicable events that had occurred in the house. She mentioned whispering voices in the walls, shadows moving in the basement, and the feeling that the house was alive with an ominous presence. Sarah became increasingly involved in her grandmother's disturbing stories. As I read, the feeling that the basement was a place of dark secrets became undeniable. However, the diary did not fully explain what caused the sense of presence in the basement or the whispers she had heard the night before. Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to explore the basement more closely. As he shined his flashlight on the dusty shelves, something caught his eye. A small piece of paper was attached to one of the shelves with yellowish tape. She peeled it off and realized it was a hand-drawn map. The map appeared to show a series of hallways and rooms in the basement, including one area that did not appear to match the layout of the house above. It was as if there was a hidden space that was not visible from the outside. Intrigued and nervous, Sarah decided it was time to explore the basement further. She followed the map, moving carefully through the dark corridors. The feeling of being watched accompanied her, but her determination did not waver. She finally arrived at the area that the map indicated was the strangest of all. There was an old, heavy wooden door that seemed to lead to a secret location. Sarah carefully pushed the door open and entered a tight, dark space. The flashlight illuminated the walls, revealing old, dusty shelves filled with old books and mysterious objects. There were strange symbols on the walls and an altar in the center of the room, covered with melted candles. The atmosphere was oppressive, and Sarah felt she had discovered something she never should have found. As he explored the space, his flashlight illuminated an ancient book of spells. She picked it up and began leafing through it, revealing spells and rituals that seemed designed to summon supernatural beings. As she continued to read, the feeling that she was not alone in the space intensified. The flashlight began to flicker and the light began to fade. It was then that Sarah heard whispers in the shadows, indistinct voices that seemed to come from everywhere. Panic took over her, and she ran towards the door, but when she tried to leave, the wooden door closed with a deafening bang. She was locked in the secret space, with the whispers and shadows approaching. The mystery of the basement had turned out to be far more terrifying than she had ever imagined, and now she was trapped in its dark heart. Sarah was trapped in the secret basement space, the wooden door locked in front of her. The whispering voices and unsettling shadows seemed to close in around him. She held the book of spells tightly, searching for a way to escape this nightmare. As the shadows danced around him, the words in the book's spells seemed to come to life. She read one of the incantations aloud without fully understanding its meaning. The moment the words escaped his lips, an explosion of light filled the space, driving away the shadows and whispering voices. The light revealed a portal in the corner of the room, a mysterious opening that hadn't been there before. Sarah knew this was her chance to escape the dark space, but she also felt like she needed to understand what was happening. With her heart racing, she approached the portal and walked through it. On the other side, Sarah found herself in a room filled with antique mirrors. The mirrors reflected distorted and disturbing images, creating a feeling of disorientation. In the center of the room, there was a larger mirror, decorated with mysterious symbols. As she approached the mirror, a whispering voice began to echo in her mind. "Who dares to disturb this place?" the voice asked, and Sarah felt a dark presence materialize in the mirror. It was a figure dressed in a dark cloak and a hood that hid its face. The figure introduced himself as the Guardian of Mirrors and explained that the space Sarah had found was a place where secrets were kept and pacts were sealed. She had invoked the Guardian by uttering the book's incantation, and now she was linked to him in some way. The Guardian revealed that those who sought power were drawn to the basement, where they were tested and faced with dark choices. Sarah remembered the inscription on her grandmother's photograph: "Those who seek power, beware the price." She realized that her family was involved in sinister rituals and pacts that had been kept secret for generations. The Mirror Keeper offered Sarah a pact. She could obtain supernatural knowledge and powers, but in return, she would have to fulfill a mysterious task for the Guardian. The temptation of power was strong, but Sarah knew that making a pact with a dark entity like the Guardian could have dire consequences. She refused the pact, deciding the price was too high. The Guardian accepted her decision and led her back to the basement. When Sarah passed through the portal and returned to the secret space, the Book of Spells was missing. The shadows and whispers had quieted, as if the Mirror Keeper had returned to his world. Sarah knew she had to escape the basement before something worse happened. She ran towards the wooden door and, to her surprise, it opened easily. The basement was silent and empty, as if nothing had happened. Daylight shone through the windows, dispelling the shadows. Sarah went upstairs and locked the basement door behind her. She was determined to keep the secret of the basement and the meeting with the Mirror Keeper private. She knew that her grandmother had kept the secret for generations to protect the family, and now it was her responsibility to do the same. However, questions still tormented her. What did your family seek in their pacts with the Guardian of Mirrors? Why did they keep such dark secrets? And what would happen if someone accepted the pact? The answers remained hidden, and Sarah was determined to find them. She put the photograph, diary, and map in the trunk, locking it again. Sarah knew that one day she would return to the basement in search of answers. But for now, the priority was protecting her family and keeping the secret of the basement hidden in the shadows, where it belonged. The story of the dark basement would continue to terrorize her mind as she sought to uncover her family's dark secrets. The encounter with the Mirror Keeper left Sarah with many questions and a sense of urgency. She knew she couldn't just ignore what she discovered in her grandmother's basement. However, she also knew that messing with supernatural forces was dangerous, and she needed to be careful in her actions. In the days following her encounter with the Guardian, Sarah began researching her family's past. She delved into old archives, scoured photo albums, and tried to track down any information that might explain the dark secrets that had been kept for generations. He discovered that his grandmother had been a mysterious woman, involved in occult practices and esoteric rituals. Many in the local community feared her and believed she possessed supernatural knowledge. The stories he had heard about the house, the shadows in the basement, and the whispers on the walls began to make sense as he connected the dots. Sarah also discovered that her grandmother had kept detailed records of her supernatural experiences and encounters with the Mirror Keeper. These records, now stored in the basement trunk, contained precious information that could help her better understand the nature of the pact and the consequences of accepting it. Determined to face the mystery and discover the truth behind her family's secrets, Sarah decided to return to the basement. She knew she would need to be cautious and prepare for any encounter with the Guardian. He met with experts in the occult and ancient rituals, seeking advice on how to protect himself from the dark influences of the Keeper of Mirrors. Armed with her newfound knowledge and a protective amulet, Sarah was ready to brave the basement once again. The feeling that she was being watched and pursued had never left her since her first encounter with the Guardian. Every step she took toward the basement filled her with apprehension. When he reached the basement door, his hand shook as he turned the handle. She knew that once inside, there was no guarantee that she would emerge unscathed again. But her curiosity and her determination were stronger than the fear that enveloped her. As she descended the stairs, she shone her flashlight into the basement, revealing the wooden chest that contained her grandmother's records. She opened it and began to read the records, which detailed the rituals, pacts, and meetings with the Guardian of Mirrors. As she read, the words seemed to come to life, and she could feel the Guardian's presence growing stronger. Time seemed to distort in the basement, and shadows danced around him. She knew the Guardian was approaching. Sarah focused on her protective amulet and began reciting words of banishment that she had learned from the experts. The light from the amulet shined brightly, pushing the shadows away. When the Mirror Guardian finally appeared before her, his figure was shrouded in shadows, but he seemed weaker than before. He demanded that Sarah make a pact with him, offering him knowledge and powers beyond human understanding. This time, Sarah was more prepared. She firmly refused the pact, telling the Guardian that she was not willing to pay the price he demanded. She challenged him, questioning his true nature and intentions. The Guardian, weakened by the amulet's light and Sarah's determination, finally agreed to free her. The basement space seemed to shake as the Guardian disappeared into the shadows. Sarah knew she had faced the nightmare and survived. She locked the trunk and went upstairs, where daylight awaited her. She was determined to keep the basement secret, But now, more than ever, she felt a responsibility to protect her family from the shadows of the past. She promised herself that she would use the knowledge she had gained to ensure that none of her family fell into the clutches of the Mirror Keeper. As Sarah closed the basement door and locked it, she knew her family's dark history would continue to haunt her. However, she was prepared to face the unknown and ensure that future generations would not be drawn into the sinister pacts and supernatural secrets that had haunted her family for so long. Sarah left her grandmother's house with a sense of determination and a dark knowledge that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The story of the basement and the encounter with the Keeper of Mirrors would become family legends, reminders of a nightmare she was in. Willing to face it to protect those she loved,